Kia ora, I'm Alexia Russell. A little over 3 years ago, I did an episode of The Detail on something called the manosphere. It was just then starting to rear its, let's say it, ugly head. We all know what it is now. It hasn't gone away, and its influence is being felt in real-life classrooms, fundamentalist churches, reality shows, and even in the US military.
I'm authorizing a new screening program for testosterone deficiency for our service members, ensuring you have the right testosterone levels to operate at your absolute best.
A big focus of his Christian movement is on a patriarchal society where men are dominant and women are expected to submit to their husbands.
Women are the kind of people that people come out of.
Season 8 of Love Island USA has put a spotlight on an underground cultural phenomenon, and people are recognizing its red flags. This season has sparked conversations about the manosphere, a network of online influencers and communities that teach boys and men that women are prizes to be won, sex is a symbol of status, and empathy is seen as weakness.
Students see influencers from the manosphere as role models and don't take instructions from her because she's a woman.
Like, oh, Andrew Tate's a man, like, I want to be just like him. And like a real, just literally saying no to female teachers that are asking them to do something.
Even our Prime Minister is referencing it in relation to comments made by New Zealand First candidate, now former candidate, Stuart Nash.
New Zealand First is channeling the manosphere. I think those comments are sexist. I think he's had a history of making very derogatory comments around women over many years.
Meanwhile, in America, the poster boys of the manosphere have been arrested.
The controversial influencers Andrew and Tristan Tate will remain in federal custody as they fight extradition to England. The brothers were arrested in Miami this weekend and face dozens of new rape and sex trafficking charges in the UK. The dual US and UK citizens are prominent figures in the so-called manosphere, where they promote their own brand of hypermasculinity and misogynistic views.
Christian nationalists are openly talking about taking the vote off women.
There are some who have gone so far as to say that they want the 19th Amendment repealed.
I would support that.
And the life of an influencer who feeds on this world of lost young men just gets weirder.
Influencer Clavicula is facing criminal charges in Florida in connection to a live stream allegedly showing an alligator being shot in the Everglades. Real name Braden Peters, he's well known for looks-maxing content where people take extreme measures to improve their appearances. It's the latest in a string of legal troubles for Peters, who was arrested on battery charges in March.
Things aren't that extreme here in New Zealand, and when Stuart Nash said this about his Napier electorate rival...
He called Katie Nimmin lazy for taking time off after having a baby, described her as the laziest MP that he had come across, ill-suited to being an electorate MP.
He was slapped down and kicked out.
New Zealand First candidate Stuart Nash has united nearly all of Parliament against him, with MPs denouncing his latest comments as misogynistic, sexist and derogatory.
Katie Nimmin is an incredible talent. She works incredibly hard.
I've achieved more with National for Hawke's Bay in 3 years with a baby than he has in 9 years.
I find those comments unacceptable, outrageous, a relic from the past, and frankly offensive to every parent in the country.
Stuart Nash needs to take that kind of misogynistic behaviour and stay in Napier. I mean, that's just disgusting.
We're saying that certain things that are sexist or misogynistic, it's almost more socially acceptable to say them out loud. So I think some men, it's not all men, but some of them have been empowered to say such things in a public arena. And I think, what Stuart Nash said, which was absolutely abhorrent, by the way, but it's what a lot of them were thinking and just not saying out loud.
Claire Meehan is a senior lecturer in criminology at the University of Auckland. You could say the manosphere is her specialist subject.
So for the last more than 15 years now, I have been working primarily with young people. I've worked with hundreds of young people all around New Zealand to try and gain insights into their digital, but as well as offline lives, cultures and relationships. So I'm really interested in hearing from young people themselves because they're the experts in their own lives. A lot of the work I do is thinking around consent, for example, and what that means, how that's understood, as well as pleasure, body image, all of those sorts of things. And particularly in the last few years, a big thing that's come up in my own work is the role of the manosphere and misogyny and just how that is impacting young people's cultures.
The manosphere is not new, she says, but it's grown rapidly, and new terms have entered the lexicon: microdosing, misogyny, clout fishing, and the nudge economy.
3 years ago, many people still viewed the manosphere as some sort of fringe online phenomenon, whereas now it's become much more mainstream. So we're seeing it in politics, in different language that people are using. Even I remember reading, I think it was the US again, about the Iran war and talking about lethality maxing. And again, straight out of the manosphere playbook in terms of language. So I think one of the big things that happened, I believe it was last year, was the Netflix TV show Adolescence.
Dad, you're not reading what they're doing. It's a call to action by the manosphere. 80% of women are attracted to 20% of men. You must trick them because you'll never get them in a normal way.
I think that was a bit of a cultural turning point because it brought the word misogyny into our language and dialogue in a way that it wasn't really used before. So we talk about sexism, but not really misogyny, and they are quite different. And I think particularly for parents watching it, it was, and sorry, spoiler alert, but for parents watching it, it was the idea that there was this young protagonist in it who had murdered a classmate, and he was just sort of a normal, everyday, ordinary boy. We often think about men who murder women as monsters, and it suits us as a society to do that because then we think, oh, I don't know anyone like that. It would never be anyone that I would associate with. Where this really showed, again, just this ordinary boy was influenced by these beliefs. Of course, there was a lot of other stuff through the program. You know, if you watch it closely, you see all the aggressions that run through it. But I think it opened a lot of people's eyes to what is happening online, what sometimes young people are encountering, and some of the issues around that. And I think what concerns me most about this is most of these messages are increasingly normalized. So young people don't seek out, you know, how to hate women or how to be a misogynist. They don't seek out this content. So usually they encounter it through like humor or memes or even searching for self-improvement or gym advice or dating advice or all those kind of things. So the messaging around misogyny has become more subtle and embedded into everyday online culture. So we're also seeing Gen AI creating new opportunities for misogyny, so including AI-generated sexual abuse, so deepfakes and harassment of women online. But I think one of the insidious ways in which it works, and it's often referred to as microdosing misogyny. So again, it's not that it's bang in the face, here it is, this is misogyny. So it's not, for example, stating that, you know, women are inferior, where you may get some content creators or some influencers, for example, making repeated jokes about women being too emotional or framing women as manipulative or gold diggers or suggesting women are less valuable as the age or portray feminism as making women unhappy or even normalizing the idea that men should dominate relationships. So while these messages individually might appear trivial or ironic or, you know, even a bit of a joke, but when young people are encountering hundreds of these messages every week, they really begin to shape their beliefs about gender. So what we're seeing is the normalization of this harmful discourse. So people become desensitized because each piece of content seems insignificant in isolation, but it's no longer shocking. You know, misogyny is beginning to look normal and beginning to be embedded and believed as normal.
So hence the microdosing.
Exactly, yeah. And we talk about nudge economy as well. So again, the idea that if, well, any of us are looking online, it's a little bit, a little bit, a little bit. So it might start off with some fitness advice and then maybe a sexist joke and then some more fitness advice and then a slightly more sexist joke and moving it along that way. And that's the insidious nature of it.
Nudge economy. Gosh, it's a whole new language, isn't it? And
I know, right?
The subtleties are quite tricky sometimes to get hold of. What is the difference between sexism and misogyny?
So misogyny is essentially a hatred of women, and we live in a patriarchal society. So to be clear, a patriarchal society doesn't benefit anyone really. A very few do benefit from that society. So it's usually middle-class, white, straight men in power. But it's about systems of power and oppression. So misogyny is whenever systems of power and oppression work against women. So it's beyond just an individual dislike or hatred of women, but it's about the power that upholds that. So sexism, again, is pervasive and insidious, but misogyny is the more harmful big brother to that.
And you talked about adolescence before, and that obviously was fiction, but so impactful. What about Louis Theroux's documentary after that? Because that also had quite an impact, didn't it?
I was entering the manosphere, a wild frontier of streamers whose behaviour is reshaping the culture.
It did. And again, I watched that as well. And some parts of it I loved, but there were also parts of it that I thought, oh my goodness, we could have done so much more here. So he showcased a number of creators in the space. So to my mind, it was HS TikTok, Myron Gaines, and a few others. But he didn't talk to young men, for example. So what are they saying? We saw in the doco young men coming up to these influencers, but we didn't hear from them about the impact.
Well, Max Stevenson is a mental health counsellor in Christchurch who founded Iliad Youth, an organisation that deals with the impacts of this.
I just felt that this problem was so prevalent. 100% of the young men that I worked with were radicalised. We're seeing insane things online.
100%.
100%. Every single young man had a view that I would consider antisocial or bad or negative or just in some way hurtful to their long-term prospects. It was everyone. It was all of these young men from this broad cross-section of society. And realistically, I could be talking to someone from a good family with really good parents, and they would just say, just offhandedly, yeah, I hate women. And you just sit there and be like, what? And it was just this horror, this feeling that, no, you can't say that.
Wow. And do they understand what they're saying?
So what I think was happening is if a young person spends 2 hours a day on their phone, that's damn near 1,000 hours of screen time a year. And none of them are spending 2 hours on their phone a day. They're spending significantly more. And so what was happening was we were getting these ideas being pushed into these kids' head from somewhere. These kids are spending, and by kids I mean anyone from 12 to 18 or furthermore, these people are spending potentially thousands of hours a year being fed a message that they have very little ability to interact with critically, to think critically about. And they're just absorbing these ideas. And so at some point, one of them might make sense to these young people, or they might have this connection and just go, I'm in a bad place right now, and this person is offering me a really, really elegant solution, which is, let's blame somebody. I went on a date, or I tried to talk to a girl and it went really badly. Why is that? Oh, women are all horrible. All they want is money and cars, and if you don't have money and cars, then they hate you, and they hate you, and they hate you, and they hate you. Give me money and I'll tell you about this.
Wow. That's quite scary.
It was terrifying. And part of the reason that I really wanted to start this charity and have started it is because as adults, when we hear that message, we react so instantly. And the kind of one that I always heard was a mum says, hey, young man, can you empty the dishwasher? And they just lash out and they go, no, F you. And suddenly, as a mother, you are forced to realize that you're not living with the child that you raised, the person that you loved and nurtured. There is a young, angry man in your house who might be significantly bigger and significantly stronger than you, who suddenly is very, very, very angry and resentful of you. And
because you're a woman?
Because you're a woman, for no other reason than you are. It's this entrenched misogyny, bigotry, racism, just this idea of hatred and division that is, from a monetary point of view, so easy for an online predator. Let's call them what they are. These people are predators. For an online predator to sell, I'm selling you this idea that whatever is wrong with you. At 14, this insecure young man who has every right to be insecure because their body doesn't fit, their voice drops, they're pimply, when they look in the mirror they don't like themselves. And then someone online who has a girlfriend who only ever wears a bikini and has a Lamborghini and a Maserati and a pool and a boat and is always smoking a cigar and dressed in a suit and has the muscles and the tattoos, and that adult is telling you, hey, you need to be like me. And the only way you can be like me is if you do what I say. And I'm saying, I hate women. And it's just such an easy message to parrot. It's such an easy blame to lay that they just fall for it. They don't have the ability to be like, hang on, why is this 40-year-old talking to me? Hang on, if this person is earning $15,000 a second, why is he selling a course for $20? They just don't have that ability to see and think critically. And so going back to that mum who hears this message for the first time, what you do naturally is you come down incredibly hard on it. You go, no, you can't say that. Don't say that in my house. How dare you? You get the father involved. You get someone involved who comes in and says, no. And unfortunately, what you're doing is you are pitting yourself against this young person's influences, because these are age-appropriate behaviors. Young people are supposed to, I don't know, do stupid things. They're supposed to stay out late. They're supposed to run down the road. They're supposed to play fight with their friends. Like, there are age-appropriate behaviors in which you are against your parents.
There's the rebel stage.
There's that rebel stage. And these are good and proper things, but the issue is it's just been hijacked by this incredibly toxic behavior. And so you as a parent might suddenly find yourself pitching the love that you feel for your kid up against this parasocial relationship that your child has with an influencer in America. And you might not win that. This person might have such an alluring message that you as a mom, you as a dad might lose that battle. And suddenly you're sitting there going, oh my gosh, there is an actively adversarial young man in my house whose behavior I can't predict, who I don't feel safe around. Oh no, what do I do? Where do I turn to? What do I do in this situation?
Yeah. So what do you do?
This is the tricky bit. Realistically, and to talk myself out of a job and a career, they're probably going to be okay. Realistically, most young men are going to go through a phase of anger and resentment, and something will happen and they'll have a bad time and something will happen. Most of them will come out of it. Fingers crossed.
But in between, there's harm, and that harm is happening to young women.
Yeah, so this is where I slot in. Is the problem is that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you hate women as a 14-year-old, as a 15-year-old, and you're just, I hate women, I hate women, I hate women, then when you go on a date for the first time, when you talk to a girl in an age-appropriate way, and you accidentally say, yeah, well, you know, the best woman is worse than the worst man. This idea that if a man really wanted to, he could do anything that a woman could do better. That young woman who is quite rightly going to say, well, hang on, no, they're going to reject you. They're going to say, I don't want to be around this person who sees me as less than a human being. And so you get into that self-fulfilling cycle of, oh man, I tried to reach out and I got rejected and now I feel pain and hurt. And I could take a look inside myself and be like, man, that 15-year-old girl probably didn't want to be told you are less than me simply because you have a different chromosome. And so what happens is you get into this horrible, horrible situation where the young man rejects them and it becomes self-fulfilling. And so suddenly you have anger and resentment, and then you have confirmation of the anger and resentment, which drives them further into the arms of these influences, and it just spirals down.
What's the solution? Mac says it's to teach kids critical thinking, to get them to think for themselves and police their own algorithms. But he says there's an issue with who's helping them with that.
Most mental health professionals are women. And these people just will not engage with someone who they see as less than themselves. Yeah. These people will not engage with someone who they off the bat hate and resent and fear.
Do we need to start talking about this in schools, particularly in boys' schools?
Long story short, yes. Long story short, this needs to be up there with, the kind of drug and alcohol education that we already give.
So it's got that ingrained in the last few years.
Yeah, and I think much like how we all used to talk about smoking is so bad because one puff and you're addicted, it's a lot like that. If you hear a message from someone that just perfectly resonates with where you're at that moment, you can spend hours and hours and hours listening to this person, and they're all parasocial relationships, so you have no ability to affect what this influencer is saying. You can only receive these messages and do your best to build a worldview around them.
Claire Meehan points out New Zealand schools don't currently have mandatory consent education, and some of the sex education guidelines schools did have been removed. Plus, a lot of crisis organisations that did this work are being defunded. And so for information, young people are turning to the internet, where AI-generated deep fakes are compounding the damage. And we can see that with global surveys on gender attitudes.
What we are seeing is kind of more entrenched beliefs about gender equality as well and gendered roles. So thinking about Gen Zers, for example, so a majority of both men and women felt that gender equality efforts had gone far enough. So many men actually thought that they were being asked to do too much. So of those surveyed, I think it was more than half of them. Half of men thought that equality efforts discriminated against men. So this is one of the kind of key areas that the manosphere plays on, that it's almost a zero-sum game of, or a big slice of pie. There's only so many bits. So the more women get, the less men get. When we know that that's not true, that's not how equality works. But for a lot of content in the manosphere, it's the notion that feminism's gone too far, or we live in a gynocentric society that is all about women and women's rights. So we are seeing this divide. So even I remember one of the most striking bits of the survey was with Gen Z men. So about a third of them said that wives should obey their husbands, and a similar amount said that husbands should have the final say in important decisions. So it's like we're going back to the 50s here, and gendered attitudes are moving backwards.
That's it for today. The Details are newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. This episode was engineered by Jeremy Ansell and produced by Gwen McClure. Thanks to Claire Meehan and Max Stevenson. I'm Alexia Russell. Bye for now.